Hello guys, you are welcome once again to my platform. So in today's video, we are going to look at naming variables in Java, right? In our previous lesson, we discussed about how to create variables and how to print them using the print line method. And I said that the next video is going to be about naming variables, or variable naming, or you can say that what identifiers, right? So before we start, I want you guys to know that we are still on what variables, right? And we said that variables are containers that we use to store data, right? And for you to create a variable, you will need what? A type, right? So I'm starting from what here. You need a type, then you specify what the variable name, right? The variable name, then you have what your value, then you terminate it. So this is how we create variables. Okay, so in today's video we are going to focus on what the variable naming, right? Naming your variable. This video is going to be about what? Naming your variable. Okay, and this variable name you can also refer to as what? Identifiers, because they help us to identify our data in the computer memory. Okay, so we are going to look at some of the rules behind creating your variable name, right? So we have some rules in terms of what creating your variable name or creating an identifiers. We have some rules, and I will also give you some tips in terms of creating your identifiers, right? So let's start from the rules. Okay, so if you are starting from the rules, the rule number 1 is saying that when you are creating your variable can contain letters, right? Your variable can contain letters. That's the first one. It can contain numbers, right? It can contain numbers. It can also contain what? Underscore, right? It can contain what? Underscore, right? And lastly, it can contain what? The dollar sign. Okay, it can contain the dollar sign. Okay, it can contain the dollar sign, right? So these are the first rule that you need to know in terms of what creating a variable name or identifier. If you want to create a variable name, right? So these are some of the few things that you need to know. Your variable name should contain letters, numbers, underscore, or a dollar sign. That's the first thing that you guys need to know. Now, the next thing that we are going to talk about is that when you are creating your variable cannot start with a number, right? So if let's say I want to create a variable and I start with 2 num, the IDE is going to complain, right? I cannot do something like this, but I can start my variable, right, with a letter. Okay, I can start with it with a letter. I can also start with it an underscore. I can also start with it the dollar sign. Okay, but not number. You cannot start a variable with a number. That's the first thing, or the things that you need to know. Okay, now the next aspect that you need to also know about variable naming is that if you are using 2 words, we don't give a space, right? So let's say that I have a name like first name, right? And you can see that I have a space over here. If you do something like this, the IDE is going to complain. So when you are using 2 words or 2 letters, we add them together, right? We add them together, or you use underscore, right? Either you are adding them together or you use underscore. Okay, now the next rule is that when creating a variables, you cannot use special characters, right? You cannot use special characters. These special characters can be the hash, the asterisk, right? These special characters, you cannot use them when you are creating your variable name or your identifier. You cannot do that. Okay. The next aspect is that variables are case sensitive, right? Variables are what? Case sensitive. The reason why I'm saying that variables are case sensitive, or the variable names, right? The variable names are case sensitive, right? Or identifiers are case what? Sensitive. Meaning that, right, this name over here is different from this one, right? This name, right, is different from what? The second one. The reason is that you can see that the first letter over here, this name is small letter, right, or the lowercase, and this one is what? Uppercase, right? In terms of naming, these are two different what? Variables. That's why we say that variable names are case what? Sensitive. Okay. And when creating variables, you cannot use what? The reserved words or the keywords. Those keywords have a meaning to the Java program. So these reserved words, some are, let's say that you try to use int. Int have a meaning. Okay. You try to use if have a meaning. You try to use class, right? These are reserved words that have a meaning to the Java program, so you cannot use them when creating your variable name. Okay, so I hope this makes sense to you guys. So these are the rules, right? When creating a variable, you can create a variable using letters, numbers, underscore, or the $sign. When you are creating a variable, don't start with a number, right? You can start with letter, you can start with underscore or the $sign. When creating a variable and you are using two words or two letters, no spacing, you add them together, or you introduce what? Underscore. We don't use special characters, right? And variable naming are case sensitive, right? It means that these two names that you are seeing in our normal English, they are the same, okay? But in Java, if you are creating a variable, these names are two different what? Variable names, okay? And you cannot use what? Reserved words in variable naming, right? You cannot use if, class, or int because they have a meaning to the Java what? Program. Okay, so these are some of the few things that you need to know, or the rules in terms of creating an identifier or a variable name, right? So now let's have an example over here. So I'm going to remove this. Okay, so right now if I'm creating a variable and I'm using int as my variable, the first rule is that we can use what? Letters, we can use numbers, right? We can use underscore, we can also use what? The $sign over here, and I can have a data like 5, right? You can see that here the IDE is not complaining, okay? But the moment I change this to, let's say that first I'm using 2 and I'm using now like this, you can see that the IDE is complaining because I cannot start a variable name with a number, right? But I can start with what? I can start with underscore, right? I can start with what? An underscore like this. It's not going to complain. I can also start with what? A $sign, right? And it's not going to complain. Are you getting it? Yes. Okay. And when we're using two words, let's say that first name, right? Don't separate them like this. The IDE is going to complain. You add them together, or you use underscore. So these are some of the rules that you need to know about identifiers, right? You don't need to start with a number. Two words, add them together. Don't introduce the reserved words, the keywords that have meaning to the Java program. Something like if, it's not going to work, right? Using class, it's not going to work because it have what? A meaning to the Java program. These things are reserved words that have meaning to the Java program. Using else, it's not going to work, right? They have meaning to the Java program, so it's not going to work for you. So when you're creating your variable, I can use what? First name like this, and everything is going to work what? Fine. Okay, so these are some of the ways that you can create what? Your variable, and this is what a unique variable name. And one thing that you need to know is that variable names are unique, right? Because if I want to print out this message over here, this first name, right, this first name is holding 5, right? If I try to create another variable, right, using the first name again, okay, using the first name again, holding less than 100, right, you can see that it's complaining, and it's saying that the variable first name is already identified in the scope, right? So this means that variable naming are unique, right? So anytime I want to print out this message, I'm going in for this variable name. So that's why variables have some rules in terms of you creating that variable, right? And one tip that you need to know is that when you are creating a variable, you can just use a single letter like this, okay, right? Or you can use a meaningful word that have a meaning to that data, right? So let's say that I want to get a person age, and I have a variable name like A, right? And I also have another variable that say person, right? Person age like this. And you see it. Which one of these makes sense to you? Is it line 5 or line 6? Definitely it's going to be line 6, because right now you can see that this is person age. So you know that this data here is a person age. The A, you understand it, but not all that well, right? You see that A can mean different kind of things, right? So when you are creating your variable, you make sure that that variable that you are creating, or the variable name that you are creating, have some kind of meaning to the data. I hope this makes sense to you. And now, in terms of creating variables, right, we have some conventions that you can choose in terms of creating your variable names, right? So we have one called the camel case, right? We have one called the camel case. Okay, so camel case, and this camel case is saying that, right, when you are creating an identifier and you are using two words, right, the first letter of that first word, so let's say that I'm using first name like this, and the first letter should be small, and the next word, the first letter should be capital, right? So something like this, name, right? So if you are using this format, then you are following the camel case, right? The first letter is going to be a small letter, and then the next letter will be a capital letter. In terms of the Pascal case, the Pascal tool, right? Pascal. So the Pascal is saying that, right, the first word, right, the first word that you are going to write, right, the first letter should be capital, and the next word should also be capital, right? So this is the Pascal case, right? Then we have the snake case. That's the last one, right? The snake case, right? So with the snake case is also saying that the first letter is going to be small, right? And the next word is also going to be small, but in here we separate them using underscore. So these are the three conventions that you can use in terms of creating your identifiers, right? But don't use the three of them. Choose one. Either you are using the camel case, or you use the Pascal, or you use the snake case. But mostly in Java, you are going to see the camel case, right? Mostly I am going to use the camel case, right? So these are some of the rules and also guidelines that you can follow in terms of creating your variable. I hope this makes sense to you. Please, if you have any question at all, just make sure that you leave it, and I'll try my best to answer you. And please subscribe to my channel, like the video, and share it with your friends. That will be very helpful for me. Thank you very much, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.